Hey, that looks like you're on now.
Okay. Check, check.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Mm, It's interesting. I'm not alone.
No, this happens once in a while on this platform, but it's included as part of my phone system, so I don't have to pay extra for it.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's get what you pay for in a way, I guess.
Oh, oh, and I think yeah, that's not what you want. I think
Okay, so what's cool is if this link works, since this is like a room, I think the link is never changes, which could be really nice and easy.
it might be beneficial for you. I'm gonna go pee pee real quick.
Yep.
All right.
Hmm.
All right, I'm back.
All right.
Did you miss
Uh,
me? You missed me.
I did. Yeah. I was about to start crying.
See, I hurried. I knew. Oh. Hmm. What is this? Screen share is blocked. Interesting.
So I could do this in Discord theoretically, right? Voice channel.
I
Oh,
don't know that it
voice
has to.
video. Okay, hang on. Oh wait, there she is.
Netcom is just finicky as hell because
Yeah,
on the
I
PC,
would say like 8 or 9 out of 10 times it works fine, but that's not the first time I've seen that issue. I sent your screenshot over to support.
like
Uh,
I literally cleared it on my PC, and as I was doing that, I tried it again on my iPad, and it let me in. I was like, no, 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 because it didn't work on the iPad right last night. So now I'm back on my PC. So yeah, it's
wow.
definitely finicky. I'm assuming it's because Netcom is not anywhere close to where I live. I've never heard of it before. So
So, well, this is a third-party cloud product that they're white labeling, but
okay.
just because we are 10 minutes late, and I want to try and get closer to like the 1 hour class time that we promised,
Yep.
let's jump into it, and then we can
Mhm.
hash it out afterwards. Okay, Engineering Bootcamp Day 2. And Emmy has childcare today because of the later time, so otherwise she would be here. Hopefully the recording works, and she's able to view this. Hi, Emmy. Okay. Uh, okay, so just a recap of what we did yesterday. We talked about what a program is and how it runs on a computer. We talked about why we're learning C sharp, what we're going to do over the course of the class. We talked about what runs first, so it's whatever you stick into that program.cs file. And we talked about some really basic commands such as console read line and console write line. Um, Another thing that I want to stress is that these are all just text files, right? Um, and everything starts with the main method. The modern version of C sharp is hiding the main method from you, and that's fine. It works. You actually want to put as little as possible in there, but older versions did kind of show a main method. And when we get in today's lesson, you're going to learn really quickly what that would have looked like. But I didn't want you to have to change the default, so that's why we went with the more modern structure. Um, and compiler makes the magic, right? The compiler takes those files and turns them into the code that runs on the CPU, RAM, and storage. Okay, so today, any questions on the recap before we get into today's lesson?
Nope.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm good.
Awesome. Okay, so then we're going to talk about variables today. And basically, variables is just data that we're shoving in RAM somewhere, right? And you did learn variables, like when you did your algebra and you had this little n plus something, n is a variable. When you did Pythagorean's theorem and you did a squared plus b squared equals c squared, a, b, and c are all variables. That's what we mean. It's basically a name to a spot in memory that's storing some data. And when we did our programs yesterday, let me see where my program went. Here we go. when we did our programs yesterday, you had something like this, and you said var, adventurer name, or whatever you chose to do. Var says make a new variable, and adventurer name is the name that we gave it to. You could also do like, oops, I forgot my semicolon. Oops. Look at that. It already knew what I wanted to do. So this is Pythagorean's theorem, and you can see we declared three variables, right? But the thing is the reason variables have these like shorthands everywhere is because when you're doing it on paper, you don't want to have to write it out all the time. And when you're in the early days of computer, you were limited to 6 or 8 characters for naming a variable. So people got into the habit of compacting things. Don't do that anymore. It's modern. You can put a full-on sentence in here as the variable name. Make it descriptive. You don't want to have to guess later on what A and B and C all meant, you know? Um, so take advantage of the technology. Okay. Um, this is new. Variables, oops. Variables have a type. Okay. Well, I'm going to give you some examples of that and explain that more on the next slide. It has a name. When we talked about adventurer name, that was the name. When we talked about A, B, and C, the name is A, B, or C, respectively. It has a value. So in the case of our code yesterday, the value is whatever we typed into readline. You could also say something like, and we just told the computer that A is equal to 1, or A is equal to 100, or 1,000, or whatever it is that we want the variable to be equal to. And those values can change. We're going to see that probably more tomorrow than today, but maybe a little bit today. It exists for a scope. We're not going to talk too much about scope just yet. That'll be coming soon. But what it means, what they mean by scope is that it may or may not live for the entire length of the program. Kind of depends on your use case whether or not you want it to. Okay. Um, all right. Okay. Yeah. So pro tip, do not under any way, shape, or form abbreviate when you name a variable, and also be specific. So the reason being is that if you abbreviate your variables and you come back and look at your code a year later, you're gonna be like, what the heck is ibijigigawega? Right? Like it made sense when you were typing it, but you're not gonna remember it, you know? And
Can you put
go
one of
ahead.
those little the double slash thing before that so that you have a note?
You could. Yes. Yeah.
I'll put a sticky note as to what your abbreviation is if you accidentally used one.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what
So
I'm kind of thinking, right? That's what it's supposed to be for, right?
you
That's what that double slash is.
that is exactly what that is for. So what you could do is I forget exactly what it is, but there's like the 3 different sides of the triangle, you know, and you could say A is equal to the um uh oh, I can't even spell
The
hypotenuse.
hypotenuse.
Yeah. It's
The
not. C is actually the
hippopotamus.
hypotenuse, but yeah, the A is the hippopotamus of the triangle. Yeah, so you could definitely do that, Mike. Um, and that's fine too. The thing is these integrated development environments have IntelliSense. So if I do something like so IntelliSense is guessing based on me typing ADV that I want adventure a name. So I don't actually have to retype the whole thing. The other thing that these IDEs have is you can rename them. So you can do this like quick action refactor and sorry, that's the wrong one. You can do rename, and then instead of adventure name, it can be player
Oh
name.
my god, and they'll do it throughout the entire thing. Wow.
Correct. So
Fucking awesome.
absolutely nothing wrong with being really good about how you use your comments, you know, but there are some tools so that you can have really explicit names and have it be easy to maintain the application. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then be specific, right? Like you'll notice we called it player name instead of doing something like var user input equals console dot read line, right? Because if you start doing a bunch of different things, you might later on forget what user input it was they were actually entering right there, you know? Um, which again gets into why that renaming is helpful, right? Maybe I start off as user input and then later on I realize that's too general and I can make a change and be like character name, you know? Uh
Or you do like user input 1, user input 2, user input 3, and then you get lost on which one's your which, right?
exactly. So don't abbreviate and be specific. Pro tip. Okay, let's talk about types. So far, everything you've been doing has been what we call a string. Okay. And what that means, that's like when we have this stuff in the double quotes and you kind of like hover your mouse, it says class system string. Essentially, string is um, text, numbers, symbols, anything you can type in on the keyboard, more or less. I think you can probably even do emojis as strings these days. Okay.
Oh wow. Okay.
That's different than integers. Integers is going to be your whole numbers, right? Positive and negative. Decimal has your decimal place. For memory reasons, decimals have a smaller range of values that the processor can handle than something called a float. A float can get really, really small and really, really big, but in doing that, it's less precise. Don't worry about it too much. We'll explain some basic use cases, but like if you're counting money, decimal is usually pretty good. If you're doing Planck's constant, float is pretty good. If you're doing um, days of the month, integer might be pretty good. Although we do have date time, depending on your use case, that might be better, right? Boolean is really important. So I shortened it to bool. I probably should have spelled it out the whole way. Boolean, and that is true or false. Some languages put this in as 0 or 1. C# does true or false, which is nice. Uh, Dates can actually get really complicated. We'll get some examples of those. But if you wanted to store, like if you look at your file system, you have a date created and date modified for every file, and date time is how that's handled. GUID is general unique identifier. It's this like really long number that you can generate, and it's essentially like it can't. It's the likelihood of you generating that exact same number is less likely than the universe ending. You know, um, so those are really good for making sure that we have what are called primary keys. We're going to talk about that more when we get to database technologies. I believe next week. And then we're not going to talk about lists just yet because we're going to talk about lists to maybe tomorrow when we get into control statements and loops. But lists are another common data type. So one thing you might be thinking is why not just use strings for everything? And the reason being is if I come over here and I have, so in this case, A is an integer, right? But if I have var b equals 2, okay, uh, it's there are a lot of cases where this may or may not work. And especially if somebody puts this in here, okay, uh, it's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't convert this string to an integer for it. It'll try and do some auto conversion, but it's not always going to work. So to make our program more consistent, it's better just to do 2. And you'll notice the difference between the string and the integer is that we don't have the double quotes. Is that kind of making sense?
Yeah, because you're
The
assigning a value.
string.
Yeah. Now let's talk about var real quick. So you'll see here it says int32. It's figured out based on these guys' types that this is going to be an integer, but we can be explicit about it. I didn't show you this yesterday on purpose to like, and we can just tell it, hey, these are all integers. Okay. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and if you hover over read line, it'll tell you it's going to return a string. We'll talk about that question mark a little bit later on. Um, okay. Uh, so var is just nice because what it's saying, it's a cheat, and var is a way of like having to type less when we're programming and say make this new variable equal to the data type returned by whatever's on this side of the equal sign. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As opposed to having to do string or int or whatever. Okay. And so hopefully it makes sense like why you as a programmer would want to use strings in some places, integers in others, decimals and floats, and so on and so forth. Uh,
Now,
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
So if I do integer and somebody tries to put in an A, let's say, right?
Yep.
It'll kick back. Nope, wrong.
Yeah, generally speaking, you're going to get some kind of exception. It does make attempts to do some auto conversion. Um, so for example, if I were to take a decimal and add it, like let's say this is decimal, right? Uh, Sometimes it'll try and I think right now it's not. So you see how it says implicitly convert? You can you can
No,
write
it's
some
really hard to
fancier
read that.
code. Okay, what it says,
You're,
so it says CS0266 cannot implicitly convert type decimal to int. An explicit conversion exists. Are you missing a cast? So what this means is there are times where it will auto convert one variable type to a different variable type. But in this particular case, it's saying, nope, I can't do that. And what you can do is tell it to convert this A from a decimal to an int. The 32 is how big of an int. There's smaller ones which save space and memory. But 32 is if we're not trying to run like the program on a really teeny tiny bit amount of memory, you can use int32. You know,
so
yeah.
so why would you add a conversion versus just changing the line?
Yeah,
Right.
good
So why wouldn't you
question.
just change decimal to int? Why are you adding a conversion to a different
Yeah,
line?
the reason being is let's say that I want to take some money. Uh right. And Mike had a great week. Okay. Went
Holy
to
moly!
Vegas and he won.
Yeah, he did.
Okay. All
I want to
right.
see those numbers every week.
Yeah.
Me too.
Okay.
Um,
But the thing is the agreement Mike had with his buddies is they would all here what we're gonna call it. Mike went to Vegas, okay, and okay,
yeah.
and Courtney went with him, but unfortunately Courtney lost $132.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay.
Blackjack.
All
I
right.
just,
Yeah, but Mike and Courtney agreed they just wanted to go to Vegas and have a good time, right? And so what they're gonna do is total their winnings together and split them evenly. Okay. And that way they're more likely to have a good time before they start their betting. Okay. So we have to figure out how much of that money goes to Mike has to give to Courtney, right? So we can do some really basic math here. I misspelled your name. I'm sorry. Oh,
No, it's fine.
okay. And then I need to divide that by 2. Sorry, that was supposed to be a plus sign. Okay. So I got 2 decimals and I want to divide it by 2, right? There's different ways this could go, you know. And we might even want to round it. Maybe we're not doing dollars, maybe we're not doing cents. And so we're not doing cents. So nothing past the decimal point, right? So there's this is an example of where we're working with different data types, and we might not know at runtime exactly what we're going to be doing here, right? Like when we get into statements later, maybe it's 15 friends, right? And
Right.
and they have to register before the app knows who they are. So you don't even know if it's going to be 15 at the end of the day, right? Whatever is here in the denominator could be some other value, you know? So this is why we have to kind of manually do our convert sometimes, Mike. This is an example. Yeah. Good question. Okay. So the type is still fixed. In C#.net, you can't take A. Once the program compiles, A will forever be a decimal. It can't be anything else. Okay. You can change it when you're programming it, but once we turn that program on and start running it, you can't change A to something other than a decimal, and you can't change B and C to something other than integers. Okay, they're fixed. Then yeah, and we want them to be easy to read. Okay, so in a few minutes here, we're going to be talking about objects. Okay, and so in prep for that, we're going to talk about value versus reference. So we have integer, bool, and decimal as some of our types, and the values in there get stored. We can reassign them, right? So we can later on come through and say that C is equal to 23 now. Okay, so C used to be equal to A plus B. Now I've said C is equal to 23. We've reassigned it. Does that make sense?
So anytime somebody puts in C, like as an answer for something, it's automatic. The system's automatically going to say this is 23.
Correct. So if I
Or
do
backwards.
console.writeLine up here,
Okay.
and I do a C, right, it's going to print out 10,002. Okay. And
Right.
then
That's
if I
before you
come
assign
down,
the value there.
right, then over here, it's going to do 23. Variables can have their values change. That's totally cool. Nobody doesn't bother anybody. Okay. Okay. Now, I'm gonna wait till we get in. I'm gonna come back. I think I'm doing this a tiny bit out of order. I'm gonna explain references after we do objects, because it'll make more sense. We're gonna come back to these last 2 lines. Okay, hang on to that thought. Okay, yeah, because that makes much more sense once we talk about classes. Classes are the backbone of object-oriented programming. So they are a custom data type, okay, and it defines a shape. I know this is all very esoteric. It's going to make a lot more sense in just a second here. I thought I had a cool picture on here. Yep, okay, it's coming. And it just stores data. It's sort of like a blueprint, okay? So, for example, we're we're going to make a class here because I want you to see how this is very different. Okay, so this is our program up here. Now, we started off with doing a game before we started getting to this variable explanation. Let's keep with the game concept. Now, when you build a game, there's a couple things that like pretty much every game has in the history of games, from arcade to tabletop to anything, and that's you have some kind of representation of your player, right? Whether it be a
Yep.
spaceship in Galaga, or a little gun in Centipede, or your character in Dungeons and Dragons or Destiny, you've got some kind of character that the player is manipulating. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as our example for creating a class, we're going to create a character. And to keep our code nice and clean, we're not going to stick it in the program file. Watch this really carefully. I'm going to right click here on my project name, and I'm going to do add new item. Or if you want to get a little bit fewer clicks, you can just do add a class. That both takes you to the same place. Okay. And it's gonna give you all these templates. We don't need any of those templates. Don't worry about that. We do want to name it. This is going to be our character class. So we're going to name it character. All right. And it's going to create that new file. So then I now have two text files. Okay. And you can see it did this stuff up here. Don't worry about that for now. Don't worry about namespaces for now. Remember when I mentioned scope before? A namespace is part of how we define scope, but don't worry about it. This is really the important part to focus on right now, is that we have this new class that's called character. And I took out the word internal. I want my entire program to be able to see my character class. So I'm going to call it public. Everybody can see it. We're not trying to hide it. Okay. Some languages don't even have this ability to hide things. It's definitely not important for what we're doing right now. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Now, since we're making some kind of video game, probably one of the first things we need to know is the character alive or dead? Okay. So what I did is I created a variable called is alive that's Boolean, right? Um, and oh, sorry, there we go. And when it first gets created, that character is always alive. We're never going to start with any dead characters. Does that make sense? You with me so far?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Mike, you following along?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're gonna go with a Dungeons and Dragons example, because it's really easy to work with. So some other things that a character has in Dungeons and Dragons is they have an integer value that is their strength score. Uh, we haven't rolled for stats yet, Mike. Right. So we'll just start them with the
Clear-
minimum possible.
Clearly.
Over here, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm following along though.
Yeah, and Courtney, I mean, really, you have similar things in your
Yes,
Destiny stats. You know. Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Ah.
Maybe it's
Okay.
going right. There you
And
go.
then we could just keep going down, Mike. We could I'm gonna put some comments in here, but we could do savings throws, we can do skills, we can do
Hit
equipment,
points.
yep, hit points, level information, right? And basically we made it so we can keep all the things that describe our character in one spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And I like keeping all my classes in separate files, but for the class, it's going to be so much easier for you guys if I put multiple classes in the same file, and that's okay. Um, so maybe the next one we're going to have, Mike, is monster. Okay.
Mm.
Because there's a little bit of a difference between our characters and our monsters, right? Um, and so maybe it's maybe on monsters. These are really simple monsters, and we don't want to store their strength, dexterity, constitution, all that. We just want to have their to hit bonus and their hit points and their armor class.
Right.
Okay. Um, Make sense?
Yeah, but you have to assign values to those, right?
We do have to assign values to those. We're going to get to that in just a second. But you're correct. So classes are creating these custom data types, and they define a shape that describes that object. Um, None of that code actually did anything, right? It's a blueprint for something, and like you said, we have to create a version of that and stick the values into that blueprint. Does that make sense? As a
Yeah.
concept? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, before we get into how to do that, I want to talk about this. This is probably one of the single most important things that people get wrong in computer programming is they're doing object-oriented programming and they do not follow the single responsibility principle. Okay? And what happens is if you jumble too many things into one class, you end up with like spaghetti code, and you end up with programs that don't work well and lots of bugs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've played
And
Helldivers.
yeah, exactly. So single responsibility principle, right, says that this class, it should really be responsible for one thing. Like, I intentionally separated out characters from monsters, right? Because monsters does some things different than characters. Okay. And we didn't want changes to the character to suddenly add or remove capability from a monster. Okay.
Right.
Um, and yeah,
When
so
when do you decide to when does a monster become or as the next thing that you have in a class become its own class? Like how do you differentiate between the two?
yeah, so
That's when it changes
this
the responsibility, right?
that well and but you're right, Mike. It's definitely can get very nuanced. That's why I picked this slide over here, or this graphic. So you have all these things that need to be part of your program: paintbrushes, paint rollers, wrenches, silverware, pliers, and a drill. Okay, and in this particular case, they said, okay, all my painting gear is going to go together. My pliers, drill, and wrench is going to go together, and my silverware is going to go together. But you could easily take each one of these and further subdivide it so that spoon is a class, fork is a class, knife is a class, drill, wrench, and pliers are separate classes, and paintbrush and paint roller are separate classes. It
So
depends
can
what we're building, and that's part of why you end up with um, like, we can't just say if we just taught everybody the single responsibility principle, then we wouldn't have all these bugs, because there are times where paintbrushes and paint rollers can be collapsed together and times where they have to be separated out. And a lot of times when we're refactoring things, it's because we're taking a larger group and subdividing it, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think I get it. It's more about how you are using it, right? So, for instance, I would not have put the drill with the other hand tools. I would have said hand tools and power tools. I would have had four of
yep,
these instead of three.
that's
so
exactly it.
can so can
Go ahead, Courtney.
classes be within classes?
Absolutely can.
Okay,
Yep.
so like
So let's,
you did character and monster, right? But like there could be, I don't know, 6 classes of monster. So I create a new class um and refer back to this class for public class monster. And then that's got 6 versions in itself. And then I could
yeah,
continue on making classes within those classes for the races or for how strong they are.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, and so this is how you do that. So see, I made a class for location that right now just
Hmm.
has the name, right? Um, and then not only did I put it inside of character, but I also put it inside of monster. It can be reusable.
Okay.
Or could you like make a monster under monster? Could you do like a Titan? You can make it a Titan monster or a Warlock monster.
Yeah. So what you might do here, Mike, is we can make monster types that has some stuff. For now, we'll just give it a name because
Hmm.
we haven't quite decided how that's going to change things, right?
Right.
Right.
Right. And then you define the different types, and then okay, so but that would all be one class, right? Monster would be its own class.
Yep. Monster is its own class. Monster type is its own class. Location is its own class. So see how they have these curly braces? This says everything inside of here belongs to the monster class. Oh, sorry, the location class. And this is where anything after this is something new. It's no longer part of the location class.
Okay, so then is monster a variable? It's a variable that I can use inside of my other
Mm-hmm.
my yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can come over here and we can create an instance of a monster.
No, monster, not goblin. Oh, I see.
And then I can have you said warlock is a bad example. Let's go with orc.
Titan or whatever, yeah. Or,
Yeah. And now in memory, I have 3 instances of the monster class. And I can even come in here and go goblin dot, not location, we'll get into that in a second, armor class equals 12.
So you're putting this in the
In the program. See that?
in the program itself, and then I would
So
go into the character class and create those underneath monster, or create a new class to refer back to the monster class that's under the character class.
correct. It's not
Okay.
uncommon for like a basic game engine to have like 40, 50 classes,
Yeah.
or more, like for a
yeah.
basic one, right? And you'll see the this is defining a structure, right? And this is doing logical work. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Cool.
It's plugging in
And
the
over,
values that we're assigning to this variable.
right. What's an armor class for an orc?
14.
14, 50. And how
So
about
these
for a titan?
variables,
Probably, I don't know, 12.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Size difference.
so these variables that you're putting in the program, are they automatically being put into the monster class right now in the character class,
Sort
or
of.
are they
Think
only
of this as
written in the program?
this right here is a template, okay?
Okay.
And in memory, in RAM, there are now 3 versions of that template that have that same structure, but totally
Mm-hmm.
different values.
Okay.
And if I do this, oops, because goblins travel in packs, right? Oops. So it's 2 different goblins with the same armor class, okay? And
Mm-hmm.
let's um let's pick on these guys a little bit. Oh my god. Okay, Mike, give me a goblin name.
Stew.
Stu.
Stew.
All right. Courtney, give me another goblin name.
Steve.
Steve. Steve the goblin. Okay. And now over here, both goblins are currently alive. because we defaulted it to true. Right
Okay.
now, integer automatically defaults to 0. Okay, so they have 0 hit points, 0 hit bonus, and 0 armor class until this line of code runs and changes their armor class from 0 to 12.
Right.
Okay, yep.
So then you have to give them hit
And right
points in
now,
it to hit.
yep. And so in memory, we're now storing these previous things, right? Because this is one big program right now. It's very messy, right? But we've got in memory, we're storing a player name, an action, an A, a B, a C, Mike's winnings, Courtney's winnings, split, as well as 2 goblins, an orc, and a titan. As well as, like, if we did some, you can go over here, you can do console dot right line, and you can do goblin. Oops, I see. I may have a bug, guys. I'm gonna show you this in just a second. Goblin 2's monster type, and monster type had a name, right? And we didn't set it yet, so right now it's gonna not print anything. But assuming that we had set that to like goblin at some point, then monster type would say goblin. Now here's my bug. I did not make goblin 2 Steve. I changed goblin 1's name from Stu to Steve. Do you guys see that?
Oh, yep. Yeah, because you didn't put 2 there
You didn't put
to.
Goblin
Yeah.
2.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep,
So
exactly.
what kind of bug would that be?
I never thought about bugs having kinds. I would call it a typo, I guess, if it was me.
Okay, so
But the impact on the running application could be that, Mike's character, which we didn't define yet here, goes to hit the goblin. Here, let's pretend like originally the goblin didn't have a shield, but Goblin 2 did have a shield, right? And Mike goes to hit the goblin, and the game gives Mike the wrong result because it was using, even though Goblin 2 doesn't have shield, it gave it the higher armor class value, and now Mike missed instead of hit, and he's frustrated and throws his controller against the wall.
True story.
Or you go in, or like, let's say that we had done this to characters, and both of you guys are trying to play together online, and then Courtney's character is named Stu instead of Steve, or vice versa, like your characters' names get swapped. That's how that could show up in an actual scenario.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see what the next slide is. Okay, so this is a lot of what we just did. We defined a bunch of variables within the class. What we didn't do is these methods right here. So classes contain both these and these. And let's talk about
print.
this.
Sorry.
Print is a method. That's the same. It's a different language's way of doing console.writeLine.
Okay.
Okay. So let's create a method to make it, you notice how right here I have to specify each variable and set its value? That can be a lot of typing. Let's start creating a shortcut that gives me less typing. And let's do it for the character, okay? So let's say when we create a character, we want to force them to always enter in. Oh yeah, we'll add a name first. Good idea. Okay. We want the character. So we're making a method, and you can tell that because oh my goodness, what is going on there? Okay. I got these 2 parentheses. Okay. Look how helpful it's trying to be. I mean, that's awesome. And that's pretty much what I was going to almost do all of that. So I'm just going to hit enter and accept. Oh, no, not enter. Is it tab? Okay. Come on. Okay. Now, how do I make you do that? Tab. Okay, and look at all that code it just wrote for me. Okay, but the thing is, we're never going to create a character that is dead, so I don't need this one. For my own sanity, I want to put name first. Okay. And I just want to do their basic stats. I don't want to get into location right now. Later on in the process, we'll get into location. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
not sure I understand
So
what location is anyway.
you're telling it every
Oh,
time
like
that
where on the map you are, Mike, is location. You're in the tavern, you're in the cave, you're on square, 23, something like that.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Courtney, what were you saying?
so what you're doing there with the where it says 0 references, you're saying that anytime somebody creates a character, um the program is automatically going to populate these things that are in your bracket.
Yeah, and here's how that works. So now we're gonna come up here and um enter your name. Let's just build a character one time, okay? I'll show you something fun. We didn't do this yesterday. Okay, so give me a second here, guys. We'll get into. I'm trying right now. If I were to run it, it's not going to run, and I don't want to explain quite yet why we're doing this. We'll get into that later, but I want to be able to run the program. So give me a second. Okay. All right. And this is all good. Yeah, we don't need that right now. Okay. So let's just focus on this part right here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hello, adventurer, enter your name, and hopefully they're going to enter in their name, right? Then we're going to say, now enter your strength score, and we want them to put in a number. If they put in something other than a number, the whole program's going to crash. Later, we'll talk about how to stop that, but for now, let's just hope they do it right. You know? Okay, so my name is Stu, and my strength is 12. Okay? And so that all worked just fine. And you can trust me, or you can practice on your own to see how it would blow up. But what I wanted to show you is just by doing the write statement and then the read line, it kind of put it in that single line. Does that make sense? Just a different way of using the same tools from yesterday that you can use to craft your experience. Okay.
Yeah.
And then for the sake of time here, I'm going to not retype all that just yet. Oops.
I thought you said don't abbreviate. Pro
Yeah,
tip.
well, I'm yeah, but we're over time for this section of the course, so I got to speed it up somehow. Okay, and then what I can do is say, and then we got player name, strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Can I just not have that part? Mm. Yeah, no, I'm back down to this issue. There's a feature that I usually turn off that is causing it to do all this stuff with the question marks and nonsense. And I'm gonna cheat real quick and just turn it off. That's fine. There we go. Okay. There. Now it's a little happier. Okay. All right. So now they went through, they entered in all their stats. Now I have an object here that I can write the player name, and I can do that like this, right? And I can write the player character's strength score and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? You can that's what these dots mean. It says within this instance of this class, give me this variable value.
Hmm.
You following me there?
Yeah.
Okay. And the IntelliSense kind of helps. Like it goes and looks ahead and to see what's in there, and it'll kind of stop you from doing one doesn't exist. Okay. So that's a kind of method called a constructor. You can have more methods. So what we could do is we could say okay, and so on and so forth, right? And then over here in the program,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe there's a lot of times in the game, right, where you want to be able to print the character sheet. Maybe this is a command that they can type in that says, show me my character sheet, right? So they can see all their stats. And you don't want to
Right.
have to type that 30 million times, right? So what you can do is player character dot print character sheet, right? And now I don't have to type this again.
Or lets them check it whenever they want to go back to it for whatever, reference it for some reason.
Correct. So that's a method. It's like a special set of instructions. And see, there it is. Name, strength, and then it just continued on. You follow me?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we got variables and we got methods, and they're living inside of a class. Okay. Um. Okay. So for today, when we get to practice, don't worry too much about this, but I want to show you some cool stuff. Okay. Um. So these guys right here, within, even though these are variables, they're a kind of variable called a field. Okay. And we also have some other ones that we could create called properties, which is kind of cool. So let's say that every time, here, let's give this character hit points. And in our game, every character starts off with 6 hit points. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then I might want to create some properties. Let's put my properties right here. I'm going to move name up because it's throwing me off just kind of hanging out by itself. Okay. Um, but down here, I'm going to create some properties and I'm going to create another Well, okay, hang on. I'm going to hide hit points. Okay. And you don't have to, this is kind of like a C# thing, putting the underscore in there. You're not necessarily, you don't have to do that. But the reason I want to hide that is so I can create this property. Okay. And this mic is the reason why so many video games suck is people don't do this often enough. Okay.
Okay.
So this is the simple. Okay. Technically, this is the simplest. Okay. And you can kind of do this. Adding this thing that says like get and set right here is the difference between having a field and a property. Okay. But they don't have to be blank, right? This does the same as this. Okay. What it says is create a hidden value where I store it. Okay. And so when somebody goes and says, what's my hit points? It's running the getter, which goes and gets the hidden hit point value from right here, which is currently 6. Okay. This is going to make so much sense in just a second. The reason I want to do this, like instead of just storing everything as a field, the reason I want to do it as a property is so that later on I can do, tomorrow we're doing control statements, but I'm going to show you one right now. Okay. So first I want to set my hit points to the new value. Okay. And then I'm going to say if hit points is less than or equal to 0, okay, then is alive equals false. Now I know
Right.
that's an oversimplification of the rule set, but here's the cool thing that we just did here, right? Is now we automatically change is alive based on whatever the hit points are. Every
Right.
single time hit points changes, the game will always do that check and it will always be perfect. Does that make sense? As opposed to
Yes.
having in two separate methods where you said, hey, everywhere in the game where a person could possibly lose hit points from like falling or from getting shot or from getting stabbed, having to do this check to see if they're still alive. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So this is a field and we can kind of do a little comment here, right? These are my fields and these are my properties. And the advantage is that properties will have these extra logic. If you don't need the extra logic, you might as well just do a field and save yourself the typing. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Okay.
also I think in a bigger sense, right? Like if we're creating, Destiny,
Yeah.
is you don't want it having properties for absolutely everything. It would just the amount of data it would have to
It's a
go
little bloat.
through
Yeah.
instantaneously. Yeah. So I think I understand why they may do you differentiate between the two depending on the situation.
Yeah. And this is what I affectionately call event-driven programming. When you use the properties this way, instead of having like a really large program where you've got everything coded in one long blob, right? This kind of like breaks up the logic and ties it to the object and how the object should work, you know? And so it's kind of like things happen to objects and there's rules on what happens to these objects when things happen to them. And this is
Hmm.
this is kind of object oriented programming at a conceptual level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What we've been doing so far is called procedural programming. Okay. So it's actually two different styles. And we're gonna slowly move from procedural, which is a great way to learn, to object oriented, which is a great way to do really complicated interactions without it just being a nightmare of reading through tens and 40,000 lines of code for a program is common. And imagine trying to read through all that. It'd just be, you get lost. But if you're like, oh, you know what, that character's hit points went to 0 and we just had it as a field, and you had, rules in certain spots. You'd be like, oh, well, what we should have done is made hit points a property, and every time their hit points goes to 0, then uh, kill them. You know. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
I
Awesome.
like this. I like being able to differentiate. Just saying.
Yeah, it's a great practice. So that's event-driven programming, which is one of our design patterns, at a high level. Okay. Constructors. So we created two different kinds of methods. I didn't call this out really clearly. So I want to just show a little bit more. So this one is the constructor, and you'll notice it doesn't have this return type here. I'll talk about return types in a minute. Um, it doesn't have a return type, and it has the exact same name as the class. That gives it superpowers. See, this is the class character, and this is the constructor for character. And this is a different kind of a method, a more normal one that doesn't return anything. That's what void means. Void means don't return anything. Okay. And when we go and use them in our program, we use them two different ways. So you'll see here, there's this new keyword, right? And we're creating a new character. But when we went to print it, we're working with the instance and telling it to print. And you see there's no new because we're not creating another character, another version of the object, right? We're just doing something with that object.
Right, because the character sheet is defined by these values that we have in the class, and we're just telling it to do that for this thing and give it this name.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
So typically we make sure it starts off in a valid state. Like maybe there's like we shouldn't have stats less than 3, right? So we just start them all off as 3 to make it valid, right? Um, this is why we have constructors. Static versus instance. Okay. Um, uh, okay. So everything we've done so far, when we made a character and we made our goblins and our orcs and our titans, these are all instances. Titan is an instance of a monster. This orc is an instance of a monster. Goblin 2 is an instance of a monster, and goblin is an instance of a monster. And in in a multiplayer game, we would even have, multiple instances of character, right? Now, sometimes you might want to have a case where all of the instances of monster have a particular variable with the same value, and that's called a static value. Okay. And we kind of did this in this example. We did apples and oranges, but we did this with our monster class where we had some goblins and some orcs. So okay, I want to get to okay, here's a great example of why you might want to have a static property within one of our classes, sticking with our game here. Okay. So let's say that one of our classes is the config class. Okay. And this has a bunch of game settings. What's a good game setting we might have? Let's call it
No HUD.
yeah, that's a good example actually. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a place. Okay. And now because this says static, um, every instance of the character object will get the same values for config. Remember how over here armor class was unique to each goblin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mhm.
now config is going to be shared by all player characters. And so in our case, okay, if we have player character 1, Uh, I'm gonna do another little cheat here real quick.
The curse of being able to type fast.
Well, we're also like way over what I was hoping to be done with class for the day, but I want to finish the concept. So, um, uh, taking advantage. Okay, so now I've got 2 player characters. Okay, and okay. So what I did is I made a config object, right? And I assigned it to, notice I used character, right? You can, I, all characters now have the same value, which means if I come over here, if I, if I go right here and I do console print, or what is it, right line, okay, it's not gonna ask access to that. You used to be able to do things a tiny bit differently, and they're doing a better job of separating static and stuff. Uh, let's do it this way. Okay, so basically with static ones that have this keyword right here, right? Uh, when I print the character, right, and then let me come over here and do config that HUD equals false. Oh, hang on a second. Oh, my bad. I hadn't assigned it yet. Okay. Oh, it's gonna be mad at me. Hang on. Not wisdom. What's the other one? The things it prints. What does it print? Name, strength, and HUD.
Strength.
So I got to set my strength. Otherwise, it'll be mad at me there too. Okay. Try again. Okay. All right. So you'll see what happened is we initially set HUD to true inside of the config class. It's on by default, and we printed, and we didn't assign it to PC1 or PC2. We assigned it to the class as a whole. You can only do that because it's static. Okay.
Mhm.
And then we printed out PC1 while it was still true, and so it showed Jonathan has HUD on, and then we changed it to false, and then we printed player 2 and it showed false, and if we were to reprint Jonathan, HUD would now be false. It's shared between both instances. Does that make sense?
Unless you tell it otherwise.
You cannot change the fact that it's static at runtime. You can only change it. You would have to come in here and delete the word static. Right.
No, I'm saying you have to turn the config to false for the PC2.
Well, you
So here,
can't because config doesn't exist for PC2. It exists one time for all instances. So
wait. So go back.
if you wanted different HUD values for different characters, you can't do it this way. You'd have to add it the same way you do some of these other stats. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like
No.
skulls in Halo, Mike. Like you'd be saying this skull is on, this skull is off. All characters get the same skulls. You don't player 1 and player 2 can't have different skull values.
Okay. So then, oh, I see. Because you set the value for the HUD. They both have a HUD. Just one has it on and one has it off because you have it. Okay, I see. I think I get it.
Okay. Here, we'll do it. Let me do this one more time. I just kind of talked about it, but I didn't actually show it. So pay attention right here, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So HUD was true.
Mm-hmm.
Then we changed it to false,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now it's false for everybody
Right.
because it's shared.
Right. But it's static
Yep.
because there is a HUD. The HUD is the static part, the true false. I thought I misunderstood what you had done. I thought you had made HUD true statically, but you could turn it off
Oh,
individually.
no, right. It's actually config is what's static.
Yeah,
If
that's
this
what I
thing had 5
misunderstood. I
other
just thought it.
fields, all those fields would change for everybody,
And you can't change that, right? You can't in the program be like, well, this guy is special. You would have to
Right.
change the static to have the special rules.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah, if I wanted different configs for each player, then I would remove static right there.
Yeah.
And now each player can have their own config settings.
Right. And then yeah, yeah. I get it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Awesome. No, it's okay. Uh, console.writeLine is static. We don't have an instance of the console. We just have one for the whole thing. ABS stands for absolute value. This is just a bunch of math functions like rounding, absolute values, square roots, that kind of stuff. We'll get into those later on. GUID.new GUID is how you get the actual value of the GUID. These will become important later. It'll make sense. For now, you're okay with what you know. That just talks about when static can be a problem.
The smell.
Yeah. Okay. So you probably have picked up a lot of this from the examples we've been doing as the course goes along today, but the program is what should wire things together. We're going to get to the point later on where we're doing very little in program.cs, but that's a transition as you guys learn more about object-oriented programming. We're not there yet. Okay. And the reason is it improves the reusability of code. We want to have to write as little code as possible for maximum features. And it also makes things easier to test, right? If we had to check is alive in 13 different places, that means you technically have to test it in at least 13 different places. And usually you want to test to make sure that it both works as expected and fails the way you want it to fail. So that ends up being 26 different tests because you're checking in 13 different places. Whereas if we put it in a property, then it's 2 tests. One to make sure it works when the hit points is above 0 and one for less than 0. So you get into resurrections. Okay. We talked a bit about the single responsibility principle. So the class to just do one thing. We want to try and separate our data from our other behaviors and user interfaces and storage. So you can have a storage class, you can have a user interface class, you can have all your different data classes, you can even have a game engine class,
Right. Because you're gonna have
and
different. Yeah.
yep, you can have a class for whatever. That's why it's called like an object or a class and has this really vague term because it's up to you as the engineer to decide um, what exactly that class should be doing. You know, duplicate code is a great indicator that maybe you need a new method or a different class. You know, like if we're doing the same thing over and like for example, Mike, there are plenty of examples where when we roll up character sheets, we have one method that says roll 3d6 and enter your value, and then the results of that method get stuck into each of the different stats. You know, if we had to write that 6 times, that's a good indication that there's an opportunity to um, create a new class or a method so that we don't have to do things a million times. You follow me?
Yeah.
Okay. Models hold data, services perform work, clear ownership. As you guys practice, these things are going to make more sense. I'm trying to give you the tips now so that you can be like, oh, I remember from class that if I have to write this thing 13 times, I'm not being a lazy programmer, and we want lazy programmers, right? Um, okay. Uh, if we mix all of our database UI and user interface and logic in one area, then we're going to have bad programs. We have multiple things to change in that case. It makes it hard to test. It's hard to make changes to the program. And quite honestly, when you think about how much technology governs how happy we are, not following a single responsibility is generally the cause for a lot of the world's problems.
Makes sense.
Uh, yeah. uh, and so we're gonna have our startup and kind of like getting things going in program. Models are gonna store our data. Tomorrow we're gonna talk more about services, which are gonna be like our if then rules and loops and things like that. And user interface is how we handle input and output. So that means even for like a really basic program, you probably want to have at least 4 files. You want your program CS, one or more model files, right? Like character and monster could be in different files, monster type could be a different file. Then you want some services, maybe that's your game engine. And then you're probably already getting overwhelmed with all the console.do this and console.do that and read and write and stuff like that. Maybe we make a class for handling user interface that creates some simplifications for us. You follow me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to get overwhelming quick.
Yeah. And so
Yes on the fourth line.
yeah, yeah, and we'll talk through that. There's some probably tomorrow maybe we'll use that as our example. Okay. Um,
Okay.
so working towards homework number 1. Okay. We have I will make myself available for class time. Um, and you guys can do some stuff. So what I want you to think about is um what would be an enjoyable way to practice some of the things that we worked on today. Okay. um you know, Mike, Dungeons and Dragons character sheets great for you. Courtney, you could do Destiny. You could
Oh
don't
hell
have
yeah.
to do games at all. You know, you can do cookbooks, family trees. You can do, I don't know, something that you love doing. You know, but like a topic that's interesting, and I will help you define models to represent those things. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. And that because in homework number 1, we're going to ask you guys to kind of pull together a simple program for making a character sheet or a Destiny character or a cookbook or family tree or whatever. So start, you don't have to do it right now, like what that one for homework number 1 is going to be, but it's kind of like a sneak peek because you can definitely reuse this towards
Brainstorm.
it. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So what I want you to do today is create a new project separate from one yesterday, and I want you to make a class with some fields and or properties that describe that class. Create a way for you on the console to put some data into that class, and then print the results. Okay. Um, yeah,
What
that's
do you mean print? What do you mean print the results? Like just run it?
print. But good question. What I mean by print the results is like what I did right here in character, where I printed out what was in the class.
Show me that again.
It's up on the screen right now.
So when you ran the program, you typed in your name and it said these are your stats.
Yeah, so
Correct.
it runs and it shows all the things that you're okay. Yeah, yeah. So for me, for instance, I'm going to go with the D&D character sheet. We all know that's where I'm going to go. So I need to
Yeah.
have my name, strength, dex, con, wisdom, intelligence, charisma, right?
Yep. Exactly. Yep. And I'm more than happy to like keep this. What I'll do is I'll do some screenshots, and I'm gonna put this into class discussions on Discord. My screenshots to kind of give you a way to like circle back.
And for the love of God, make it larger.
Okay. I'm very new to Discord, man, so you're gonna have to bear with me a little bit here.
Yeah.
What's that do?
I don't know, but if it full screens it,
Oh, look at that!
can
Where
you
was
redo
that?
the can you redo all of that, please, real quick? But with the full screen, just real
Let's
fast.
do this part.
I'm sorry, Courtney. I'm old and my eyesight.
No, you're good. This is you might as well look at me like I know nothing in programming. So this is all information to me. I am just sponging this in right now.
Okay. So I think these are the three sections of um, code that will be most helpful towards your classwork for today. And any that I've missed, just let me know. So can you guys see that under class discussions? It says like day 1 slides, and then there's day 2 content, and then there's some screenshots.
Wait, where's that housed?
Where are you looking?
Oh, I'm in Discord. So I have
Oh,
class
Oh,
discussions, and then I
yeah.
did day 2, and then in here, I'm hoping you can like see these clearly.
Yes, link to day 2 content. Yes.
Yeah, so this is
Yes.
kind of
oh
like
yeah.
some of the stuff
I can
that
see your
is
console.
different
Yeah.
than what we had yesterday. So that when you're doing your own programs, you can kind of refer to be like, how did he do that? And then
Oh, I see. Yeah.
you got those bits and bobs handy. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So just to recap, in case anybody wants to drop off, since we are over time, you should know where code starts in program.cs. You should know about classes and instances, static versus instance, and properties, fields, and constructors. And then I guess recognize might be a little bit hopeful, but basically starting to build up your understanding of single responsibility principle, understanding that that is, a goal that probably takes some practice to get really good at.
Yeah, I do not think I could. I'm there yet with that, but that's I'll talk to you in a minute about that.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing and end the recording. So hopefully we get it for today. Oh, no. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this part of class here, and then so that we don't have a super long recording and hopefully it doesn't like crash like yesterday or whatever happened. And then I will be on Discord, totally available to call and look at your screens and answer questions and help you out however you need. How's that sound?
Okay. Sounds
And
good.
we shouldn't have any trouble with TeamViewer logging into Iron Legion, right?
If you do, I'm here for that as well, but
Okay.
you should be set up now. Yeah.
I'm in there. Oh
Awesome.
wait, I clicked the wrong visual. Huh.
Okay.
I gotta search for it.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to end this and I will be on Discord, guys. See you there.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.